بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to our broadcast. It is Wednesday, the 17th of November 2021. And in our series, Reflections on the Holy Quran, this is broadcast number 278. And in this, we are looking at chapter 2, Al-Baqarah of the Holy Quran. And we are actually looking at verse 95. And this is broadcast number 4 in our consideration of the meaning of this verse of the Holy Quran. Just to remind you that these broadcasts are brought to you by the Lahore Ahmadiyya community, which is also known as the Lahore Ahmadiyya movement and Ahmadiyya Anjuman Islam, etc. And this organization was established, this community was established by Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian. And his teaching was that although people want to bring another prophet after the Holy Prophet Muhammad, whether it's an old prophet or a new prophet is immaterial, but Holy Prophet Muhammad is the last prophet because the Holy Quran calls him seal of the prophets, and the Holy Prophet Muhammad explained this by saying that I am Khatamun Nabiyyin, I am seal of the prophets, and I am the last prophet. So now no prophet is going to come, whether it is a new prophet or an old one. However, arrangements had to be made to bring the Ummah back to the right path if it's straight. And for that, reformers or Mujaddideen are destined to come. And God will speak to them and tell them where the Ummah has gone astray and to correct them. And this will naturally lead to disagreement and so on. But although people are keen to call each other kafirs and heretics and this and that on smallest disagreement, what the Holy Prophet Muhammad commanded was that to say to a reciter of the kalima that he is a heretic, that in itself is a heresy. It's the person saying it who becomes a heretic. And Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad also taught that people are keen to point to missing prophetic revelation from the Holy Quran. Some people say Surah Walayat, some people say Ayah Rajam, and so on. But in fact, no prophetic revelation is missing from the Holy Quran. Because God had said that I revealed it and I am its guardian. So there cannot be anything missing from it. Similarly, people say that verses of the Holy Quran are abrogated. Some people say over 500 verses of the Holy Quran are abrogated. But Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad said that no, this is not true. No verse of the Holy Quran is abrogated. The Holy Quran is complete and it is perfect. And we should remember that. And then he also stressed that jihad is a fundamental duty of every Muslim. And when he was returning from fighting, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Rahmatullah Alayh said Muslims were returning from the minor jihad to the major jihad, and then went on to explain that the major jihad is a struggle within your own soul, within your own breast. And what is that struggle? That is the struggle to control your ego and your desires and so on. So with that, let us turn to our topic, which I said is verse 95 of Al-Baqarah, the second chapter of the Holy Quran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولن يتمنوه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم بالظالمين. And they will never invoke it on account of what their hands have sent on before. And Allah knows the wrongdoers. And today we are going to look at the last word, which is bizzalimin. And this occurs, its triliteral root is Voy, Lam, Mim. And it occurs in the Holy Quran some 315 times in 12 different forms. And 129 times it occurs as Zalim. And 110 times it occurs as Zalama. You can see this one is easy. It's Za, Lam, Mim. And 23 times as Zulumat. And 20 times as Zulm. Where are we? 20 times as Zulm. And 16 times as Azlam. And then a few times, 5 times as Zallam. And what else do we have? 4 times as Zalimat. And twice as Muslim. And twice as Zaloom. and twice as zalimi, and once as azlama, and once as mazloom. And basically, it is to oppress, to do someone wrong, to being the oppressor, unjust person. And so these are different interpretations of the different forms in which the verb appears. For example, the verse which talks about stopping people from entering houses of Allah uses the same word. Who is more unjust? And so on. Then the person who does that. Now, as we said, that the root va lam mim it in dictionaries, some people say that its basic meaning is to step on someone else's property, their rights, whatever, to exceed your own limits. And some say that the basic meaning is to create weakness, defect, or reduce whatever you're doing. Imam Raghib says that it means that something is not put in its proper place, whether it is by doing some kind of injustice, or the thing might be right, but the time might be wrong, or the place might be wrong. I mean, the obvious example is when we talk about these things, people think about things, like chairs. Dining chairs are not put round dining table and this kind of thing. No, it does not mean that. An example could be that there is a vacancy and 1, 2, 3, 4 people apply for it. Now, one of those people knows someone in that company or something like that, although his qualifications are not the best to fulfill that vacancy. But because of his connection, he gets the job or promotion or whatever. Now that means that the right thing is not put in the right place. Again, with right time, you can think about it this way. And this is actually a real incident, that someone went to the hospital, they'd had a heart attack, and there weren't any doctors in the hospital. And it turned out that there was a military parade, and all the doctors had gone to see the military parade. Now, that means that the right thing is not at the right place at the right time. As far as that person is concerned who's having a heart attack, the right place is for the doctor is to be in the hospital. And what is the right time? When that person arrives. And so it also means to disturb something's balance. And these were the meanings, the ones I related just now by Imam Raghib. Ibn Faris says that the basic meaning is darkness, or to exceed your authority and put a thing somewhere where it doesn't belong. And that means that it also applies to taking away people's rights and interfering in people's rights. You see, that is very, very important, that we remember that it includes protection of people's rights. And well, let's take an example that I used in the Urdu broadcast, and I have mentioned it many times previously in other lectures and broadcasts and so on. And that is that a girl approached the Holy Prophet Muhammad and said, "O Prophet of Allah, my father has married me off without my consent, without asking me." And the Holy Prophet then asked her, "Do you accept what your father has done? Because if you do not, I will pronounce that you were never married." Now notice the significance. The Holy Prophet is not going to announce a divorce. He's going to announce the fact that she was never married. So in Islam, the consent of both parties, free consent of both parties, is a fundamental to a marital contract. And the girl gave the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam a wonderful reply. She said, "Although I accept what my father has done, I accept my father's deed, what I wanted was for girls of Medina to hear from your tongue that no one has the right to marry off their children without asking them first, without their consent." Because what that father had done, he had usurped his daughter's right to decide whether she wanted to marry this man or not. The point is not whether this person was suitable or unsuitable or whatever else. The point is simply, it wasn't the father's right only. The girl had a right to say yes or no. And he had usurped her right. And so, someone said, if we implemented Sharia, then all our problems will disappear and so on and so forth. So I said to him, implementing Sharia is a big thing. So let's just start with one part of Sharia. And he said, "What's that?" So I told him about this incident in the life of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, and I said, well, let's start a campaign that the law in Pakistan should be amended, and it should be made a criminal offense for parents to marry off their children without the children's consent, without asking them first, especially girls. And he said, "Oh, well, no, you see, our society and our customs and our this and that." And I said, well, that's the whole point of Sharia, that it changes your society, it changes your customs. That was what the Quraysh used to say to the Holy Prophet Muhammad. You are telling us not to torture slaves, but our fathers did it and our forefathers did it. So who are you? Who are you to tell us that all our ancestors were wrong and you're right? They used exactly the same argument. This way, nothing changes. Sharia has come to change your customs and your practices and so on. And this is why mujaddids come. That when you go astray and when you don't do these things, then someone has to remind you. And I mean, it includes many things. When we're talking about rights, it includes the right to be immediately paid for the work that you've done. So if someone's worked for 10 hours and they only get paid for 8, that is zulm. That comes in this category. If people don't get the right to vote for the person that they want to, that is zulm. That comes under this category. And people always forget. People always forget that breaking the law, forgetting what your own limits are, unlawfully occupying, acquiring someone else's property, violating people's human rights, violating people's human rights. And that is very important because this is what we do. In Muslim countries, we don't allow this religion and we don't allow that religion and so on. The Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he went to Medina, when he entered Medina, he drew up the Constitution of Medina, the Treaty of Medina, and he got people of all religions together. The Jews and the Christians and the idol worshippers and the Muslims of Medina and Muslims of Makkah who migrated to Medina. And the first clause of that constitution was, people living in Medina constitute one ummah. Today we are told ummah is only those who recite the kalima. That wasn't the Holy Prophet Muhammad's definition of the ummah. He said, everyone living in this area, this geographical area, we constitute an ummah. Those outside this geographical area, they are not the ummah. And as long as people living here do not support an attack on Medina, are loyal to the state of Medina, do not create disruption, then they all have a right to hold whatever religion they want to, change their religion, to practice their religion, to preach their religion, and so on. Fundamental human rights are granted to people 1400 years ago. But we've forgotten. And, but the interesting thing is, one thing which is not frequently mentioned in this is the fact that ignoring yourself also means that you're a zalim. Actually, going back to the girl, I remember an incident in Hyderabad in India. We were in a tailor's shop and I saw a boy about 12. He was sewing something. So I said to the owner, I said, schools are open. Shouldn't this child be at school? And he said, what for? I said, well, to get some education, to learn to read and write and, maths and all that. So he said, well, what's he going to do if he gets that education? I said, well, I don't understand. He said, well, he's going to do tailoring. So rather than waste his time sending him to school to learn to read and write, I've started teaching him how to sew, and then I'll teach him how to cut, and then whatever. If he doesn't do it, I'll have to hire someone, I'll have to pay their wages, I'll have to pay his school fees. And 5 years from now, when he's 15, 16, whatever, then I'll start training him. But I started now because in 4 or 5 years, he's going to be an expert. So what's he going to do if he learns to read and write? What is he going to achieve? But that's not the point. The point is that education is a fundamental human right. Without education, there is no difference between a donkey and a human being. And this guy was depriving his own son of that right. So he was a zalim. But then the person who deprives himself of development is zalim as well. Your soul has a right over you. The Holy Prophet Muhammad, someone, Hazrat Aisha said to him that, this girl, she was just married a month or 6 weeks ago, and I saw her today and she was all dishevelled and so on. And I said, you're a new bride and you should be all made up and all this kind of thing. And she said, who for? My husband works all day and he stands in prayer all night. So what's the point? And Hazrat Aisha Radhiyallahu Ta'ala mentioned this to the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and the Holy Prophet called that man. And he said, I've heard this. And he said, yes, that's true. And the Holy Prophet said that it's not goodness that you exceed the limits in one direction and you violate people's rights. He said, everyone has a right over you. Your neighbors have a right over you. Your wife has a right over you. Your parents have a right over you. And he ended by saying, your body has a right over you, that you give it proper rest. In the same way, your soul has a right over you. That you do not do anything that will mean that your soul will suffer in the hereafter. We know that we'll have to account for our deeds. The body will perish, but the soul will remain. It's the often given example that you are pregnant. If a woman is pregnant and she smokes, it affects the fetus. That fetus has a right to expect that the mother will not do anything that will damage it. If she does, she is zalim. In the same way, we have our souls inside us. It is our duty not to do anything that will damage our souls, not to usurp other people's rights, etc. Another way to look at this is, and I'll briefly mention this because our time has come to an end, that one word defines the ideas I've been mentioning, and that is Nur. Nur is the opposite of Zulumat. Zulumat is darkness, and Nur is light. Now, that darkness can be the darkness of ignorance. And that Nur is the light that removes that ignorance. So, if you are not educating yourself or your children, you're depriving them, you're keeping them in the dark. One darkness is the darkness of ignorance, and that Nur washes it away. The most eminent example of Nur is the revelation from God. What you can't find out by your own efforts, God has explained to you through his revelation. So this darkness is of many types and many kinds. And that Nur deals with all manner of darkness. So we've slightly overrun our time, so I take my leave of you with the prayer that whoever you are and wherever you may be, may Allah keep all of you safe and sound and free from harm. Assalamu alaikum, Khuda Hafiz, and goodbye.